ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकी नंदनाय च नंदगोपकुमाराय गोविंदाय नमो नमः। ओम अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनच्छलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं सागरजातं सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्णकरुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेशा गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमोस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतविष्णुपदाय नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतविष्णुवेदांत स्वामी नामने नमस्ते सारस्वती वाणिचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादिताश्च करोति वाचालं पंगुं लंघयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं परमानंद माधवं श्रीचैतन्येश्वरं। हरि ओम। Hare Krishna. So thank you for accommodating the adjustment of the time. So we are proceeding in our discussion of the Bhagavad towards the conclusion of the pastimes of Lord Rishabhdev. So we are moving to chapter 6, which is entitled The Activities of Lord Rishabhdev. In the previous chapter, we essentially concluded of how Lord Rishabhdev instructed his 100 sons very beautifully about the essence of spiritual life. What is the goal of life and how to achieve it? This is actually the question worth asking. So even Lord Chaitanya, in his conversations with Sanatana Goswami, that was the question very humbly. Sanatana Goswami, as of course, Sanatana Goswami is knowledgeable, but he took a very humble position of as if he's a conditioned soul, saying, who am I? What is the goal of life? Why am I suffering the threefold miseries? So these are the questions which are possible to be asked only in the human form of life. Athato Brahma Jigyasa. And these questions and the answers to these questions are what should be guiding our human life. Otherwise, it is such a waste. If you see somebody sitting in a train and you ask him, "Sir, where are you going?" He says, "I don't know." You ask him, "Why are you in this train?" "Oh no, nice aircon, nice air conditioned room. So I thought I'll spend some time here. I heard they serve nice samosa here. This train, so I came. So there may be better samosas and better air conditions available outside. Don't come into the train for this purpose. You come into a train because you want to go to a very specific destination. So the human form of life is such a compartment which is supposed to take us to, or at least give us the facility to reach the highest destination. Tapo divyam puttarkayena sattvam. So very, very beautifully, Rishabhdev has guided his sons. And by guiding his sons, set the framework for any ruler, or for that matter, any leader, as to what should be the guiding principles in terms of what are the key things to consider when they are taking care of their dependents. And towards the end of his teachings, Rishabhdev is so clear that these instructions are for all leaders. This is true whether you are a king, whether you are a parent, whether you are a teacher, whether you are a devata, accepting worship from their worshippers, or even a relative, or even a husband for that matter. So anybody who takes a leadership position, both father and mother, by the way. So mothers cannot say, oh, my name is not mentioned. No. It is said that both father and mother explicitly mentioned. So one should not accept that position unless one is able to deliver their dependents. That is the message. Especially because the human form of life is so special, so precious. So after Rishabhdev gives his instruction, we discussed how he installed Bharat Maharaj as the king, the eldest brother. He instructed his other sons. I am the Lord and he is my representative, so follow him. Your love for me will be shown in terms of how you cooperate amongst yourself to assist Bharat to fulfill what I just explained as the mission for not just all of you, but for all humankind. You are having a dominion over, because they are the rulers. He glorifies, he asks them to follow Bharat. He also says that while Bharat is my representative, do not forget that you need to honor, respect, and serve all the great spiritualists, because they are very, very dear to me, even greater than practically all the devatas. And greatest of the transcendentalists are my devotees. In fact, I prefer that you worship me by feeding the devotees rather than doing fire yajnas. This is a very explicit verse in the Bhagavad. So that's why our process, based on the authority of the Bhagavad, is chanting the holy names, worshipping the Lord, feeding the Vaishnavas, serving them. Only on certain very special occasions we will do a fire yajna, but otherwise we are not into that so much. Because we know the Lord likes to eat through the mouth of the devotees. So he says, follow that, worship the Brahmanas, worship and serve the Vaishnavas, have friendly relationships, a non-envious attitude towards all living entities. Because it is very important to see how each and every living entity is part and parcel of the Lord. That is the development of spiritual vision. Love towards the Lord and friendly nature towards all living entities. An advanced soul doesn't see any living entity as his enemy. Even those who hate him, he doesn't see them as his enemy. Because he understands that conditioned souls, because of their own messed up, ignorant understanding, they have developed this duality vision of friend and enemy. But he doesn't fall trap. He doesn't say that, oh, he thinks of me as enemy, so I must treat him as enemy. It's that I should not fall trap to this kind of a mentality. So anyway, so we discussed about the instructions of Rishabhdev and how later he took the Avadhuta form and traveled all around the world. In a Digambar form. Digambar means without Dik Ambar, where the directions are one's clothes. What does that mean? Which means you don't have any clothes other than the directions. Which means you don't, you have given up. So at that Avadhuta platform, at a level of being fully absorbed in his transcendental consciousness, totally indifferent to the material body. Of course, Rishabhdev doesn't have a material body, but the Bhagavatam says, based on his Yogamaya energy, to set the example of that Avadhuta stage, he played that kind of a role where he became very indifferent. Because of course, the Lord doesn't need to do that. For him, there is no difference between the body and the soul. And very interesting thing which was mentioned towards the end of the last chapter, I'm still summarizing. Mentioned towards the end of the last chapter was that, of course, he was very indifferent to how people were disrespected. This is also a symptom of advancement. A person who becomes advanced is not so bothered by whether others are respecting, disrespecting, because they're not trying to find joy in life based on such things. Sometimes we as sadhakas give too much importance to public opinion, or even for that matter, opinion within, how you say, recognition. I should not say opinion, recognition within the devotee circle. And we try to measure our advancement necessarily based on how others are clapping. Those who are advanced in spiritual consciousness understand that ultimately what is most important, it's not that others clapping is going to give us spiritual advancement. Ultimately, spiritual growth is a matter of how we shape our consciousness. That shaping of the consciousness requires a focused effort. It is possible at an external level one may achieve wonderful things, but if one's consciousness is not molded around the principles that we just discussed, principally that the consciousness is detached from material enjoyment and a desire for name, fame, recognition, and is oriented towards an attitude to serve the Lord, the devotees, and work for the benefit of all living entities. If the consciousness is molded like that, one will struggle to make substantial spiritual advancement. This is the thing. So beyond a particular point, we should not be overly considered about public opinion. So Rishabhdev was, of course, he was in an Avadhuta stage. So what to speak of? He was being insulted, stones, people would spit, people would urinate, he would not bother until finally he took to the Ajagara Vritti, where like a python, he was lying under a tree and discussed all that. So in that way, he displayed a kind of a level of renunciation, which is of an extreme sort, which only the Supreme Personality of Godhead can display. He would not even get up to eat. He said he would just lie down. And maybe some grass he would just put, it's not described in detail, but I've heard in some places that it's like that. So he was, like at a level which is unimaginable. And the last concluding point, which was mentioned in the last chapter, was that even though as an advanced yogi, because advanced yogis and an advanced level of spiritual consciousness, automatically various mystic powers become manifest within the personality of the yogi. The eight, especially the eight siddhis, anima, lagima, prapti, kama, vashayita, and so on and so forth. There are eight siddhis. You can become smaller than the smallest, bigger than the biggest, lighter than anything. You can create anything you want, get anything you want from anywhere. It's fabulous siddhis. It is said he had all, but he never exercised any of them. Never. Hmm? So the next chapter begins with this curiosity where Parikshit Maharaj is inquiring to Shukadeva Goswami. He's saying that actually, Parikshit, Shukadeva Goswami, please explain to me that usually those who are very advanced in devotional service, they have no material inclination. Their karmashayam is totally burnt. They have burnt because no other process of yoga, karma, jnana, ashtanga yoga by itself cannot completely remove the desire for material enjoyment. But pure bhakti can totally remove. Pure bhakti burns the seed of material enjoyment, which is not possible by other processes. Correct? Just like if any of you have had an experience of mowing a lawn, you mow the lawn, you mow the grass, you come back after 1 week, the grass has already grown back. I cut. What happened? Then you realize that, oh, you cut only at the top, but there is something inside also, right? The soil. So it will grow back again. So in some places, they will, to ensure that nothing can grow again, they burn the soil. They put fire all over. That even if there is any seed which is in the soil, everything gets. Once the seed is burned, then you put so much water on the seed also, it cannot sprout. Burning the seed is the best way. So only bhakti, karmani nirdahati kintu cha bhakti bhaja. Govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. Brahmaji is saying in Brahma Samhita, the seeds of karma, that seed, what does that seed? Seed means that deep innermost desire to enjoy materially. That is the root, the seed of karma. Nirdahati means completely is burnt. Bhakti bhajam, by devotional service. So bhakti is so powerful, pure bhakti we are talking about. You do karma mishra bhakti, you will not achieve that result. But when one does pure bhakti in a very intense way, it burns. So, Shukadeva Goswami, Parikshit is telling Shukadeva Goswami that, that's what we have heard and we all know that. And though mystic powers may come to such individuals, of such bhaktas, even though they don't seek them, because they have no material inclination, actually the mystic powers may still come. But why are they neglecting these mystic powers? Because they will never be attached anyway. Yes, I understand that those are not pure devotees. Sometimes they may get attracted to mystic powers. See, mystic powers, and Prabhupada mentions this across his various works again and again, that generally in the path of yoga, at a particular stage, one starts getting mystic powers. And the problem is that most spiritual aspirants, and I'm talking across the various processes of yoga, when a person starts developing mystic powers naturally because he is still not fully purified of materialistic desires, he gets deviated because he gets attracted. He's fascinated. I have this power, I can do this, I can disappear from here, I can appear here. They get so excited because, wow, I have such control over material nature. So actually they get distracted from the path of yoga rather than cultivating oneself and purifying oneself further and going towards pure devotion. Yogis get deviated. So generally it is strongly recommended in all yogas, don't get distracted by these. These are like a big test. It's an allurement. Don't go back to Godhead. Don't get liberation. Take this like a carrot. then yogis get distracted. So it's a major allure. So yogis are generally recommended not to exercise these powers even though they may have it. So I remember when I first met Radhanath Maharaj in 1993, my first meeting, I asked him this question. I asked him whether devotees also get mystic powers. So his answer was, yes, devotees may have mystic powers, but they are not even bothered to find out whether they have them. They are least concerned. They're just busy in serving Krishna. Even if they have them, they may or may not know, or they are not bothered whether they have. So you always want to depend on Krishna. And why? That is precisely the discussion here. So the question of Parikshit Maharaj is, pure devotees will never be affected because they have burned their desire for material enjoyment. So why did Rishabhdev neglect these mystic powers? That even though he is in an Avaduta platform, he could have just displayed his mystic powers. Why was he so careful to ensure that he doesn't display them? Please explain. So Shukdev Goswami says, yes, my dear king, you have asked a very good question. It is true what you have spoken, that these mystic powers doesn't affect a thoroughly pure devotee who has actually become fully transcendent. However, a yogi must always be very, very careful of his own mind. This mind, the manaha, is actually a very dangerous creature. A yogi doesn't trust his mind at any stage. This mind, is so fickle, even for great souls, that it should never be left unattended. And then he gives a very beautiful example. He says, just like a hunter, if he has captured a dangerous animal, when you capture a dangerous animal, you have to be very careful, even after capturing it, that you don't let it loose even for a moment. Why? Because when you capture a dangerous animal, for a moment, when it's captured, it becomes very docile. It seems as if it is, surrendered. It's not going to do anything. It is fully under your control. But once you become negligent and just let it loose, even for a short while, this dangerous animal will escape from your custody. And before running away, it will come around and attack you and plant on you a lethal blow and kill you before going away. This is the Bhagavatam's comparison, not mine. I'm just describing it more graphically. That's why a hunter never puts faith in the captured animal. So what the captured animal represents the uncontrolled mind. So you have captured, because the yogi through advancement has captured. But just because you have captured doesn't mean you can let it loose. No. Never. Never trust the mind. Even those who are advanced in spiritual life do not put faith in the mind. They are always vigilant and they constantly watch the mind. See, this is the thing that a yogi has to be very careful. Because we are in a material body and we have a material mind, the body and the mind have a natural inclination towards matter. And that is why one has to be very, very constantly vigilant. And Shukdev Goswami says this is the opinion of all learned people. This restless mind, don't make friends with it. What does it mean? Don't make friends with it. Because sometimes when we are with friends, we become very casual, correct? When we are with strangers, we are very formal. And those people who are not close with us, we will, speak and behave in a particular way. But when we are with close friends, we become very, we lower our guard, isn't it? We are very relaxed. The way we sit, we put our feet on the sofa and talk to them. We may be in our shorts. We are relaxed and we are talking. Even when we are talking, we are not careful, especially with close friends. Just blabber, whatever. So one should never do that kind of a friendship with the mind. Because the mind can cheat us at any moment. See, the nature of the mind is, and that's why central to yoga is control of the mind. In any path of yoga, whether it's karma yoga, jnana yoga, ashtanga yoga, bhakti yoga, central is the mind. The Yoga Sutra says that yoga is chitta vritti nirodha, is to control the materialistic tendencies of the mind, because the mind by nature is wanting to enjoy. Because the mind is, all the senses are grouped around the mind, and all the senses are asking for, I want. Enjoy. See anything, enjoy. So continuously impulses are coming. That is why through spiritual intelligence, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, one must no. If you stop responding to the alarms and you let the mind free, go all over, and by the time you realize it, it'll be disaster. And he gives an example. You know that story? Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva is so advanced, such a great devotee. But once when he saw the Mohini form of Lord Krishna, he became agitated. Lord Shiva became agitated. So this is an interesting story. So I'll just explain a little bit, because it's a very sweet story. This is explained in great detail in the Bhagavatam itself later. But just in case we don't live that long, we don't end up. Never know. So this is a story worth mentioning. Of course, I hope and pray we all live that long to listen to the whole Bhagavatam and beyond. So it is said, this story is very detailed, but I'm going to just tell the gist. That, of course, Lord Shiva is never affected by Maya. He's the Lord of Maya. Lord Shiva is not affected by Mahamaya, the three gunas. So one day, Lord Shiva, the news came to him. He was talking to Lord Vishnu and I think Lord Vishnu or Lord Krishna. And he says that, I heard that, you showed this very beautiful Mohini Murti to the Devatas, and you bewildered the mind of the Asuras, and you gave the pot of nectar to the Devatas. But somehow, I was not there at that time. I miss seeing that wonderful darshan of yours. So I have this request. Can you show me the recording of that pastime? I want to see. It is my desire to see. So Lord Hari tells Lord Shiva, really? Are you sure? You want to see that? Says, yeah, I want to see it. Really, you better be sure, Lord Shiva, don't. Then you don't tell me I didn't warn you. So Lord Hari is giving warning to Lord Shiva. Do you know what you are asking for? Says, yeah, I'm so eager. I'm a devotee of yours. I want to see that wonderful form of yours. Okay. You've insisted. What to do? I have to fulfill your desire. And Lord Hari disappears from there. And Lord Shiva said, what happened? Where is Lord Hari? Where did he go? And I was looking around and suddenly he sees a very, very beautiful maiden laying somewhere nearby. Extremely beautiful, so beautiful that Lord Shiva has never seen such a beautiful lady playing with a ball. Now, I don't want to go into a lot of details. A lot of details are discussed in her beauty, and various other things are described about her bodily beauty and what exactly happened. But to cut a long story short, because that's not the focus of this particular chapter, Lord Shiva's mind got attracted. And he started going behind this Mohini Murti. Now, just so that we understand, Lord Shiva is never affected by Mahamaya. So the Acharyas explain, when Lord Hari took this form of Mohini Murti, he actually used Yogamaya, because Lord Shiva cannot be bewildered by Mahamaya. But nonetheless, the lesson applies to us. Lord Shiva became totally bewildered by the beauty of Mohini Murti, because he let his mind go rather than keeping it under his control. And to cut a long story short, it is said he was chasing behind Mohini Murti as if, typically a man who's madly overwhelmed with lust is chasing after a young girl. And she was running and he was chasing until Mohini Murti took him to the place where all the disciples of Lord Shiva were sitting and discussing about renunciation. And he took him in the middle of the class. Mohini Murti is passing through and Lord Shiva is running behind her. And then suddenly Mohini Murti broke the spell and disappeared. And Lord Shiva is here in front of all his disciple group. So anyway, of course, Lord Shiva is so great, so transcendental. He was not embarrassed. In fact, he started glorifying Lord Hari, saying that actually nobody can bewilder me, but your potency is such that you can bewilder me also. So, but the lesson to all of us is that the power of the illusory potency of the Lord is immense. The second example is given is that of Saubhari Muni, how he was so renounced. But just by focusing his mind a little bit inside water, he was doing underwater meditation, tapasya, so that he is not disturbed. But underwater, he saw two fish coming together and enjoying. Just by seeing two fish enjoying and focusing on that, his mind becomes so agitated. He immediately gave up all his austerities and came out and got married. So these examples are given to show that if we allow the mind even for a little while to indulge, how it can snatch away. And that is what the Bhagavad Gita says, that the mind, if it is focused on even one object of the senses, just like a wind blows away a boat on the ocean, similarly the mind can totally take away the consciousness of a living entity. All these examples are given. I'm just repeating the examples of the Bhagavad Gita. One more example is given, verse 4, and that example is The mind is like an unchaste woman. So an unchaste woman has some paramours, some lovers, and she's associating with them and hiding it from the husband. And sometimes it may so happen, if the husband is inattentive, that the paramours may actually kill the husband and take away the unchaste wife. So in a similar way, Shukadeva Goswami is telling Parikshit Maharaj that those who are understand the nature of this mind properly, those who are very, very serious yogis, they know that if you give the mind space, the mind being influenced by lust, anger, greed, will eventually kill the yogi. So all these lust, anger, greed, pride, lamentation, illusion, fear, they all come from the mind. And all of these 6 enemies have the potential to disturb, disrupt, and destroy the spiritual life of the sadhaka. And combinedly, these 6 are what cause material bondage. So yogi has to be very careful to control his mind. That's why the yogi should never put faith in the mind. So that's why what this means for us is, we are of course not even siddhas. What to speak of, if Lord Shiva has to be careful, if Rishabhdev is saying he has to be careful, Shukadeva Goswami is saying. The point is, we should never, as sadhakas, lower our guard, thinking, oh, now I am advanced. Now I will not be affected by Maya. Now what can happen? I am so strong. And the most amazing thing about Maya is the moment we start thinking like this, that I cannot be affected, is the point where we break our armor and expose ourselves to the attacks of Maya. The beginning of the downfall of the yogi is this kind of a pride. As long as the yogi remains humble, surrendered to the lotus feet of the Lord, always conscious and careful, there must be some healthy fear of Maya. Prabhupada was a Paramahamsa Mahabhagavad, but following in this mood that these advanced yogis have, before he went to the West, he was praying very intensely to Krishna that please protect me, that I do not get attracted to Maya in any way. So even great souls, even though they are actually beyond all such influence, they are also taking such a position. So how careful conditioned sadhakas like us should be. So that is why it is said, learned men should not put faith in the mind. Because the mind, once it wants something and wants to enjoy something, will rationalize it in various ways. This is the trick of the mind. Oh, it is okay. It's not really a big problem. I can get away with this. I'm such a great devotee. This, that, A, B, C. The mind will find justification. The mind will rationalize. Mind will give excuses. And all these things are very dangerous for the sadhaka. So in this way, he explains this particular principle. Then the next section of this chapter, subsection of this chapter, is focused on Rishabhdev's disappearance. So that question is answered. And the lesson for us is, and if you see, even in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is so very specific about the mind. So much in the 2nd chapter and even across. In fact, Krishna goes to the extent of saying, Mana eva manushyanam karanam bandhana mokshayo. It's the mind only which is the cause both of bondage and liberation. The controlled mind, Krishna says, the controlled mind is one's friend An uncontrolled mind is one's enemy. Actually, there's no enemy outside. All the enemies, these 6 enemies that we speak about, are coming from the mind. And if we control the mind, everything is controlled. And how is the mind controlled? The mind is controlled by absorbing the mind in Krishna consciousness. Savai manah Krishna padaravindayoho. And how to absorb the mind? If you are not so advanced, and we can always absorb the mind in Krishna, the easy way out is to absorb the senses, because the mind is grouped, the senses are grouped around the mind. When the senses are engaged in Krishna and Krishna's service, the mind automatically follows. That is the secret. That's why we have said chant, serve. Sevon mukhe hi jivvadau swayamevasva. So whatever process we have been given is perfect. Just have to execute it with discipline and with great care. So we also discussed about how Rishabhdev performed his pastimes as an avaduta, where he acted as if he's a person who's very dull, almost look ghostly in his external appearance. So even though he's the Supreme Lord, even though he's not different from his body, he assumed that kind of a role of an avaduta to show as if he's totally detached from his body, just to play that role and give instructions. Akhila lokapala lala maha, even though he's the Lord of everybody. Then at one point, he decided that he wanted to wrap up his divine Leela. So he wandered all over the earth and then finally reached in South India, around the area of what is currently known as Karnataka. It is said that he passed through kingdoms which in those days were known as the kingdoms of Konka, Venka and Kutaka. I do not know what they map to in today's time, but somewhere in the Karnataka area, Konka, Venka and Kutaka. So in the area known as Kutakachala, there was a forest. He reached and entered into that forest. Of course, at that time, we have already discussed, he's not wearing any clothes. In fact, after he gave his kingdom to his sons, even at his own home, he was living like an avaduta. Disheveled hair, no clothes, totally unconcerned and indifferent to body and bodily. At that time, was the disheveled hair. Of course, he's very effulgent. Disheveled hair, he walked into that forest. And it is said when he walked into that forest, it is said by his own divine desire, through the rubbing of the twigs in the forest, a forest fire came about. So in the forest, sometimes there's a forest fire. And why the forest fire comes? Sometimes there's dry wood and sometimes the wood rubs against each other, a spark comes and something catches fire. And once there is a fire in the forest, especially if it's a dry forest, rapidly grass and the trees and one after another, everything starts catching fire. And there is massive, massive damage. Dawa anala. That kind of, the forest fire is the most difficult fire to control. That's why material existence is known as forest fire. Samsara dava nalalida loka. Pranaya karunya ganaganatvam. Praptasya kalyana gunarnavasya vande gurushi charanarvinda. The first verse of the Guru Ashtaka prayers, our Mangalarti song. The only way the forest fire can be extinguished is the rain. You cannot take buckets, you cannot take fire brigade and with a pipe spray. Very difficult. Only when there's heavy rain. So that heavy rain of the mercy of the spiritual master can burn the forest fire of material existence which is burning in our heart. That is what the first verse speaks about of the Shikshashtaka. So here, of course, there was no question of extinguishing the fire because the Lord wanted the fire for his divine pastime. So he manifested that fire, and that fire, he was totally unconcerned. He just walked into the fire. Totally unconcerned about the body. Of course, his body is transcendental. But from a Leela perspective, allowed his body to be consumed into the fire because he wanted to wind up his pastimes. And in that way, through that episode, he facilitated his disappearance as if he was burnt in the fire. Totally unconcerned, showing his absolute detachment and indifference to the body. It is said, even though it is not mentioned in the verse, the Acharyas comment, that just like Rishabhdev dissolved his manifest form in that forest fire, of course, so many other animals and trees were also burnt in the forest fire. Because forest fire means, practically all life which is living in the forest gets destroyed. The Acharyas comment, they say that because all these other living entities died in the presence of Lord Rishabhdev, in the presence of the Lord, not a small thing, right? So while the fire burnt the gross bodies of these animals, birds, insects, Rishabhdev, by his grace, by his mercy, burnt up the subtle bodies of these living entities and granted them liberation. And all these living entities who were burnt in that fire along with Rishabhdev, they achieved liberation because they were in the same fire as Lord Rishabhdev. Not a bad deal. Got liberation. So, of course, material fire cannot burn the subtle body. See, when we die, we only give the gross body. We don't become free from all bodies. Our subtle body is there. Our linga sharira, our sukshma sharira is still there. Our karma shaya, everything, our vasanas, they're all stored in our subtle body. And they will take us to the next gross body. The soul becomes liberated when even the subtle body is dissolved, and that becomes dissolved not through any material fire, but only through the process of dissolving the false ego. And the topmost amongst those processes is bhakti. But here the Lord actually, through his grace, allowed all these living entities to be fully purified by his grace, and they all attain liberation. So because the Lord gave up his transcendental, I shouldn't say gave up, but he performed his disappearance pastimes in that particular place in the region of Konka, Venka and Kutaka, the Bhagavatam mentions that in that area there subsequently was a great king. Not a great king, sorry. The word great is not used, but there was a famous king by the name of Arhat. He was very impressed and inspired by Rishabhdev's extraordinary detachment. He was the king of Konka, Venka, Kutaka. So when he heard about the activities of Rishabhdev, wow, I like this kind of extreme renunciation of this personality, Rishabhdev. So this king, Arhat, Bhagavatam says, he actually adopted this process of the display of this intense renunciation by Rishabhdev and created a religious system around it. Which is actually a concocted system. Why it is concocted? Because bewildered by Kali Yuga, he adopted the behavior of Rishabhdev, who is at an Avadhuta level, and made it like a sadhana. But he discarded the essential instructions of Rishabhdev. So this is the problem. Great souls should not be imitated. Their instructions should be followed. We should not do their anukaran, means imitation. We should do anusaran, means we follow the instructions they have given. We follow Krishna's instructions in the Bhagavad Gita. We don't try to lift Govardhan. Because we are devotees of Krishna. Krishna lifted Govardhan. We will lift. Krishna did Ras Leela, we will do. No, you will die. Or you will go to hell, one of the two things. Or Lord Shiva, we follow Lord Shiva's instruction. We don't try to imitate him. You want to imitate him, and you also drink halahal, the poison halahal, finished in a moment. Actually, you don't even have to drink. You smell the fumes of halahal, you will die. You will not even reach your mouth. Halal is so poisonous. So our philosophy is not of imitating the great soul. So this person, unfortunately, he thought he's very smart in spiritual life. He created a system by trying to emulate this Avadhuta behavior, this King Arhat. And he created a concocted, deviant religious system. Kupatha Pakhandam. Pakhandam means a cheating process of religion. And Kupatha. Supatha means good path. Kupatha means wrong path, which was actually opposed to Vedic injunctions. So the lesson is that basically he will get benefit by hearing Rishabhdev's instruction, not by imitating his. That's not at our level. That's not even a sadhana. Avadhuta behavior is not a sadhana. It is the natural outcome of indifference of a thoroughly self-realized personality who has naturally come to the state of indifference because of his intense absorption in the transcendental platform, which automatically results in total indifference to the material platform. This is not a sadhana. So this Arhat, he rejected this whole process of teachings, devotion to the Lord, service to the Lord, hearing and chanting, all the instructions that we discussed that he gave to his sons, all that he rejected. He just accepted this part. So this is the problem. Ardha Kukutanaya, you take what suits you. So we should not have this kind of a buffet system approach towards spiritual life. You know what is a buffet system approach? You go into a buffet. See, previously when you go to sit for a meal, there'll be people, they'll come serve and everything. Unless you say no, they will know how to serve and what to serve. Buffet system is you go around, you see what you like. Okay, this, I just take this one. This one I don't want. That one is, you just take what you like. Pick and choose. So we cannot take a pick and choose approach to spiritual life. Because we are not liberated souls, we don't know, we cannot mess up the formula. We have to follow the path that the great souls have given to us. Mahajano yena gatasya pantha. Cannot concoct. When we concoct or we pick and choose and we take one part and reject the another, then kupatha is resulted. Because we just did the anukaran, we did not do the anusaran. So that particular religious system, the Bhagavatam says that the followers of that particular religious system will actually become bewildered by Maya. They call themselves as the followers of Rishabhdev, but they are not true followers because they rejected his teachings and are trying to imitate him. So they will actually become bewildered, even though at an external level, they may seem religious and austere. Why? Because they are actually abandoning Varnashram Dharma. They abandon Varnashram, they abandon bathing, achman, worship, cleanliness. They accept concocted principles which are not actually teachings of sadhana for others. They pluck out their hair and do austerities which are not recommended. They are critical of the Vedas, they are critical of the Brahmanas, the Lord and the devotees. And that whole system starting from Arhat is a disciplic succession of the blind following the blind. Andha paramparaya is what the Bhagavatam says. And such people actually fall down into the darkest regions of material existence. Tamasi. So this is a warning. This is what happens. And of course, this system that is coming from there is still continuing in this world. And I have mentioned already what system that is in previous classes. So that is why we should not be over smart to try to Correct? Sometimes when we want to learn something, we go on Google, pick up a little bit from here, pick up a little bit from here, yeah. Dharmam to Sakshat Bhagavad Pranita. We have to take shelter of the great souls who have realized and follow their instructions properly, holistically for us. We cannot cook and manipulate and make up our own formula. So that episode is mentioned, how a false religion was created by those who tried to emulate Rishabhdev but rejected his teachings. So Rishabhdev's incarnation was actually to set up by his own example how dharma is to be followed. But when people do this kind of things, they become trapped by Maya. The way to become delivered from Maya actually to follow his instructions and not by emulating. So the conclusion of this chapter, I'll just take another 5 minutes, is basically a glorification of the sages, because Rishabhdev, as we just discussed, he disappeared in that forest fire. So the great sages glorify Rishabhdev's activities of his exalted personality and the example that he has set. And his example was not just that last part which some people emulate, but his whole life, how he went to brahmachari, grahastha, vanaprastha, sannyas, he ruled. Then at the right time, he gave up, he instructed his sons, and then he showed the life of an avadut. So he showed all that phases. But some people only want to emulate one without having the necessary adhikar. So that becomes very dangerous. So the sages glorify by saying that Bharatvarsha is the most pious place. Why this land of Bharatvarsha is so pious amongst all the lands on earth? Because the people here are so fortunate that they are always habituated to glorify the various incarnations of the Lord which appear here. They discuss about Ram, they discuss about Krishna, they discuss about Narasimha, so many beautiful pastimes. This place, this Bharatvarsha, and the inhabitants here are accustomed to glorifying. That's why this land is considered so great. And the Priyavraj dynasty in which this particular line is coming is also so glorified because Rishabhdev, the Lord who executed dharma perfectly, appeared in this line. No yogi can compare to Rishabhdev because he set the topmost example. And what was his topmost example? He was so perfectly situated in yoga that he rejected all mystic perfections. Mystic perfections are not the goal of yoga, rather they are the side effects of yoga. And that too side effects which one should be very cautious not to indulge in. So there's a Falashruti given. So this example of Rishabhdev should be understood for all yogis, that they must also be very careful not to get deviated. So the Falashruti is described. It is said that these beautiful pastimes of Rishabhdev are worthy for discussion by all, because Rishabhdev is the Supreme Lord, the Lord of all the Vedic knowledge, the Lord of the cows, the Brahmana, he is the Brahmanya Deva, he is the Lord of human beings, the Devatas of everyone. He who hears his activities and describes his activities, they become free from all sinful activities. Samasta duscharita abhiharanam. And all auspiciousness comes in their lives. Parama maha mangala. And one attains pure devotional service. Vasudeve eka antataha bhakti. That's what we want, right? Ultimately, that we want one pointed devotion for Lord Vasudeva. So that is achieved by hearing or describing the glorious pastimes of Rishabhdev. And this chapter concludes by making one more very important point, where Shukadev Goswami says that the devotees of the Lord are always concerned with bhakti. They are not even concerned with mukti. What to speak of mystic powers? And they take shelter exclusively of the process of bhakti for attaining deliverance from the ocean of samsara. They reject impersonal liberation because they know that bhakti is so much more higher liberation of freedom from samsara automatically comes for those who take full shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. Just by being servants of the Lord, everything else automatically becomes achieved. A devotee doesn't have to separately endeavor for his material maintenance, separately endeavor for his liberation, or to become free from sins, or to become free from the cycle of birth and death. No, by becoming Vasudeva Ekantika Bhakta, a pure devotee who has no other motivation, automatically the Lord arranges for all other desirable things to automatically be achieved without any extraneous endeavor. Shukadeva Goswami concludes this chapter by telling Parikshit Maharaj that just see how fortunate the line of Priyavrat is. That such a great personality emanated. But not only Priyavrat, oh Maharaj Parikshit, even the Yadus, the dynasty of the Yadus is so fortunate that Lord Hari, Krishna Chandra appeared there. The Surya Vamsha is so glorified because Ramchandra, so all these dynasties, the Lord has been so kind that he appeared personally in these various incarnations and he purified them and he gave them that good fortune of appearing in this line. And you are also from such a line. Actually, even though Krishna appeared in the Yadu Vansha, actually more than the Yadus, he was kind to the Pandavas. He was your relative also, but even more than the Yadus, the Pandavas got mercy. So you all are so fortunate. He gave more special mercy to the Pandavas than to the Yadus. In fact, in case of the Pandavas and you, he actually even acted like their servant. The others, he was mercifully disposed and he was kind and gave his blessing. But with the Pandavas, just see, with Arjuna, he became the driver. How he would be in front of Yudhishthir, as if he was, he would submissively be in front of Yudhishthir because he would treat Yudhishthir as his elder cousin. And how affectionate he was to you, protected you in the womb of your mother from the Brahmastra. So all of you are so fortunate that you received such special affection. So it's a very beautiful verse. I'll just recite this. And he says that this kind of a bhakti that you and your close relatives have achieved for Lord Hari is actually very, very rare. It is much more desirable than liberation. And this kind of a bhakti is very rare. In fact, Lord Hari himself is very careful whom he gives this kind of a devotion to. And you all are so fortunate that you are recipients of this kind of a devotion. Rajan Patir Gurur Alam Bhavatam Yadunam Devam Priya Kulapati Tvacha Kinkaro Vaha Ashtva Evam Anga Bhagavan Bhajatam Mukundo Muktim Dadati Karhichitsma Nabhakti Yogam. My dear King, Mukunda is the maintainer, spiritual master, worshipful deity, friend and director of both the Yadus and the Pandavas, but he was sometimes your servant. To those who worship the Lord, he gives liberation very easily, but not direct service unto him. So this is given only to those who are very, very special. So in this way, this chapter concludes. So the chapter concludes by offering obeisances to Rishabhdev, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who actually appeared and performed these beautiful pastimes to teach us the real goal of life and how to achieve it. Shri Rishabhdev Bhagavan ki Jai. So thank you very much. We come to the end of the chapter. This chapter is relatively small, 19 verses. So this brings us to the end of the pastimes of Rishabhdev. So the next chapter begins with the pastimes of Bharat Maharaj, King Bharat. So that's a very, very interesting saga, a long saga. It's a beautiful, very instructive pastime which spans over many, many lifetimes. 3 lifetimes of Bharat Maharaj himself. To show how even great souls go through ups and downs. So why all these pastimes are important to learn? Because sometimes we expect, oh, I will become devotee, everything will be smooth. Yes, job will be smooth. My children will listen to me. My wife will listen to me. My boss will listen to me. Everybody will respect me. Whatever I need will come very automatically, wonderfully. And then finally, when I press the button, the Vaikuntha Viman will come. I will sit and say bye-bye to everybody and put that picture on my Facebook profile and go. Sorry to disappoint you. The story doesn't go like that, even for the greatest of great souls. So the message is that the road is bumpy ahead, not just for devotees, for all living entities in the material world. The special fortune for devotees is devotees are given a bumper-proof vehicle, which means they are in devotional service. They don't face all the knocks. They are not rattled and shaken by the tribulations of the material world, because their consciousness is buffered with the transcendental shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it's very important to be real. So devotional service is very pragmatic and real. It teaches us how to deal with the material world, look at it positively, how to deal with it positively. If we have unrealistic, foolish expectations, then we are only going to be disappointed. So our process is the process of taking shelter and living a sheltered life as per the instructions of the Lord. And we are guaranteed that if we live our life like this, we will be progressive towards the ultimate goal, where we will transcend all these dualities. As long as we are in the world of dualities, we cannot. Just like when you are in the ocean, no matter how good the ship is, when the when the waves come, then the ship is going to. If you are in a better, bigger ship, then the shaking will be less. When you're on the road, if you're sitting in Mercedes, then the shock absorbers are a bit better. But doesn't mean the road becomes smooth. Just because you have Mercedes or Porsche or Ferrari, does the road become smooth? No. Your shock absorption capacity improves. So that's what Krishna consciousness will give us, will improve our. So we will remain less affected as our consciousness becomes soaked with devotion. Our absorption capacity of having lesser impact, the dualities of material nature will increase. Okay, so thank you very much. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam team, Jai Srila Prabhupada. Anything, any questions, any comments before we conclude? Wonderful. So since nothing else, so just want to remind you, Tuesday is the most auspicious festival of Gaur Purnima. So please observe fasting, moonrise, and make sure wherever you are, go to the temple, ISKCON temple, attend the festivities. Breakfast is with Ekadashi Prasad after moonrise. So try to follow according to your capacity, whatever you can, and absorb yourself in hearing about Gaur Leela. We have been regularly discussing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastime, so I did not do a special separate Gaur Leela class because we just completed Adi Leela. So you can revise by reading Chaitanya Charitamrita or whatever other, so many lectures are there by so many great devotees on Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. So spend the day absorbed in hearing about Lord Chaitanya, and especially for feeling so utterly grateful to Lord Hari that he has been so kind to take this divine appearance for us, to deliver us. So our gratitude always to him, that it is his kindness. He doesn't need to do. He has no duty in this world. But his heart is so pained out of his compassion that he makes so much effort to come to this world to deliver all of us. Okay, so thank you very much. So I will see you on Wednesday, which is one day after Gaur Purnima. and we'll continue our discussion. So we are entering into the Madhya Leela, Lord Chaitanya, from in the new Gaurabda, the new year. Okay, so thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna and thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Tarun, Hare Krishna
Hare
Ashwin.
Krishna and thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hari Jai Ho. Thank you everyone.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you Amit. Thank you Leela Mataji, Archana ji, Anand Sundari Mataji, Charan Lakshmi ji, Sneha ji, Sini ji. Thank you Sridhar ji, and I can see Haribol. So nice to see you all.